So we are moving into the blood and circulation system, which kind of works pretty much on a cellular basis. Remember I said we're going to start at cells and work our way up. Don't really think about this until you think about this, do you? As usual, the hours. Now we're going to talk about blood. Your blood has a liquid part called plasma and a cellular part. And we'll get into the cells eventually. But we're going to start with what's in your plasma. It is not just water. It is water, but it's water with a bunch of things dissolved in it. Materials will, if there's more materials over here moving around than there is over here, the same material moving around, so that there's exchange in both directions. The stuff that's more built up is gradually going to move in this direction till it's all balanced. That's diffusion. Water does this. And your cells are bags of water, a certain amount of water in the cells. There's water in the fluid around them, which comes out of your plasma. There's fluid in the blood that goes by. You need the water to be balanced all over the place. If the water around your cells is more dilute, then water's going into your cells and swallowing them up, screwing with their chemistry. That would be bad. If the water in your tissue fluids and your plasma is not as dilute as the water in your cells, then there's going to be more water leaving the cells than coming into the cells. That would be bad. It'll deplete your cells of water, because the chemistry is dependent on things dissolved in the plasma having a certain amount of range of motion to bop into one another and do all the chemical kind of things. So it's very important that your water is in balance with the water in your cells. The other stuff also moves from high concentration areas to low concentration areas, but we're going to start talking about. So you have a big old drink of water. Water leaves your digestive system, goes into your blood. How does your blood not get so dilute that it starts flooding into your cells? Well, your kidneys are tracking the dilution of your blood, and there's this tiny little protein molecule. It's the same molecule that's in egg whites, so you may recognize the name. And it's called albumin. And if your blood gets dilute, albumin gets dumped in, because how much water is there has to do with how much stuff is dissolved in it. And if it's always this much water and this much stuff dissolved, and you start to increase the water, you got to put more dissolved stuff in it in order to keep the relationship the same. And then as you use water and lose water, and you're not drinking it, then the albumin can be taken back out by your kidneys. And again, so as the water levels drop, you can take the albumin out to keep the same relationship between the amount of water and the amount of stuff dissolved in your fluids that balance what's in your cells. So that's an important component of, this is also why when you take in certain materials that mostly get very quickly flushed out through your kidneys, water tends to leave with it. So there's certain things that are diuretics, and diuretics often are things that are cleared quickly out through the kidneys, and the water tends to follow with it. It fills your bladder up faster, makes you pee more. Another thing about your blood, it would be very nice if it didn't leak out. You cut a blood vessel, it leaks out. You want to seal that up, basically dam up the loss. Circulating in your plasma is a small round molecule called fibrinogen. And there are activator molecules, clotting molecules, other kinds of things. But when they're activated, the clotting molecules cause fibrinogen to convert to fibrin. Fibrin is long, sticky fibers, and it can literally form a patch that will patch over, provided it's not too big a leak, right? There's only so much, this is the clotting that happens in your blood. Now, there's a type of cellular component to this, so we will come back and talk about this when we talk about the cells. But fibrinogen and fibrin and a bunch of other things, clotting factors and other things, all dissolved in your plasma to try to keep it from, leaking out when injuries happen and blood starts to leak from the system. And we'll talk about what sets that off. Okay, I'm being a little misleading here. Globulins and antibodies. Antibodies are actually a type of globulin. So I'm not being completely, I'm not really calling them completely right. But we've talked about antibodies before. So I want to kind of separate them out from the globulins in general. These are all part of your immune response system. Is that you have some globulins that are very generic kind of responses to like viruses invading, bacterial invasions. Your antibodies are very specifically made to things you've been exposed to keep you from being re-invaded by something that's been there before. Globulins are more generic. And again, when we get to the immune system, we'll talk a little bit more about those two levels of response. The immune system is just later on in this chapter. Your blood is a way of getting signals from one part of your body to another. A gland somewhere in your body produces a hormone, it goes into your blood, it leaks out of your blood somewhere else where there's receptors for that hormone, and those cells respond to the presence of the hormone. And so that so that the pituitary gland can send a message down to the ovaries, right? The hormones have to get there somehow. They dissolve into the plasma. Steroid hormones don't dissolve that great, but they get there. Now, this is just a very limited list of the working molecules that are in your plasma. Also in your plasma are nutrients that have come out of your digestive system. Sometimes they've been released other places because you've stored various nutrients in your body too. Right, you store sugar. We'll talk about that later. But mostly we're talking about nutrients from your digestive system. So sugars, the bits and pieces of lipids that need to be carried, they don't dissolve terribly well on their own. We talked about that. We talked about proteins. Amino acids that are going to be built into proteins, minerals, vitamins, all sorts of nutrients dissolved in your plasma. And for the most part, leak out through little holes in your tiniest blood vessels. So they don't really have to go out through the membranes of your blood vessels. They literally leak out through the holes. Things your body doesn't need anymore. It's use something and what's left over of it isn't useful anymore, like carbon dioxide. Right, we break sugars down, we break other molecules down, carbon dioxide comes out. Can't really do anything more with carbon dioxide but get rid of it. And so we dissolve it into the plasma. And when we break amino acids down for energy, we wind up with ammonia, which is not a great thing to circulate in your blood, so we fiddle with that and make a molecule called urea out of that. When we get to the urinary system, we'll talk about how that all works. But these are wastes that need to be cleared. The carbon dioxide mostly cleared out through your breathing, through your lungs, the urea cleared out through your kidneys. The air that you're breathing right now is about 3/4 nitrogen. It's two nitrogen molecules very, very tightly stuck together. Been accumulating in the atmosphere for billions of years, so it's built up to a pretty big level because there's not a heck of a lot that anything can do with it. They're stuck together so tightly. Plants have little buddies that help fiddle with the nitrogen to produce nitrates. The plants use that to make amino acids. So somewhere in the world, there's things that can actually use the nitrogen. All that happens with us is we breathe it in, it goes into our blood, it comes out of our blood. It goes into our blood, it comes out of our blood. But a certain amount of nitrogen is dissolved in your plasma. This only really becomes an issue with scuba divers. Scuba divers, as you go farther down in the water around you, you've got a bunch of water above you, the pressure gets higher and it squeezes you. And it's harder for you to inflate your lungs. So you've got the tank reacts to the pressure, it pushes air into your lungs at a higher pressure so you can inflate them. If you're using atmospheric pressurized air, it's also pushing nitrogen into your blood with more force than it would up at the surface. And so you wind up pushing more nitrogen into your plasma, dissolved in your plasma. The problem there is if you suddenly relax the pressure on your body, the nitrogen will bubble up in your blood vessels and block the flow of blood. That's pretty bad for you. It causes your muscles to lock up. It causes what's called the bends. That's why if you are a scuba diver, if you're below a certain depth, you do not, I don't care what sort of nasty predator you see, you do not immediately scoot up to the surface because that will give you the bends. The release of pressure from going up too fast will cause bubbles in your blood vessels, which is bad. At if you go up slowly, the nitrogen comes back out as the pressure releases. This is kind of the same way it went in. At very, very deep depths, they actually use special mixtures of not real air, it's air mixed with helium. Helium doesn't tend to do the same thing in your blood, and it also gets released really quickly if the pressure changes. So it's also why people talk really weird when they're really, really deep sea people. But that's the nitrogen. We're not doing anything with the nitrogen, so typically it just goes in and out and in and out. But under pressure, it can be an issue. I'm going to try to make these videos shorter. So we're going to do the cellular parts of the blood, but I'm going to stop here.